Hello, fellow innovators. This is Patrick Emmons.
And this is Shelli Nelson. Welcome to the Innovation and the Digital Enterprise podcast, where we interview successful visionaries and leaders, giving you an insight into how they drive and support innovation within their organizations.
Today, we're really excited to have Vivek Vaid on the show with us. Vivek serves as the Chief Technology Officer for FourKites, where he leads the development of an industry-leading visibility and machine learning platform for the supply chain industry. Prior to FourKites, Vivek served as the Chief Data Officer for Uptake, a leader in predictive analytics for industrial IoT space here in Chicago. As the head of technology for Morningstar's institutional business, platform, and mobile technologies, he led a global team of over 500 people across 13 different countries. In addition, Vivek spent a decade in consulting, retail, airline, financial vertical, building cutting-edge products, speaking and crafting motivated teams. Hi, Vivek. Welcome to the show.
Welcome, Vivek.
Thank you, Patrick and Shelli. Thank you for having me here. Although I think I'm in the wrong show because I'm not a visionary by any stretch of the imagination.
We're going to find out about that. I think other people would say otherwise, but I really do appreciate the humility. But if Vivek, to kind of kick this off, if you don't mind sharing with our listeners, for those who aren't aware about the organization you're currently with, FourKites, if you could just explain a little bit about, what you're doing there, their market fit, their opportunities. It's a truly Chicago company in that we do technology where it actually does work. So I'd love to share more about what FourKites is doing.
Absolutely. So FourKites is relatively new to the Chicago scene. The company is about 5 years old. It was founded by an ex-Kellogg graduate, Matt Elingical. Matt spent some time in the logistics space, sort of before his time at Kellogg's. And so, he saw this sort of need for the ability for us to get information that is cross-enterprise stitched together. So we live in a logistics industry today that spends over $1 trillion in spend in the US alone, and another $1 trillion in spend outside the US. And the information in this space is extremely fragmented. You've got companies with supply chains that span all the way from a factory in Shanghai, perhaps sending goods on a truck to a port, on a ship. That ship then, goes to South Africa. There is a transshipment there, comes to a port in LA. There may be a truck that then transports the goods from that ship to a rail yard. That train then comes to a port in Chicago. That then gets transported by another truck to a distribution center. That distribution center then sends all of that to its retail stores. I mean, just, all of that sort of seems like logical. Yeah, why not? That seems like how the industry works. But, our customers have about 20 to 25% of their total inventory in motion at any given point in time. When I say in motion, it's in transit from the sport of, sort of the manufacturing origin all the way through to, the consumption of that goods. And you've got this extremely complex supply chain that is managed. A lot of it is on paper and different systems. All of these companies are operating in their own silos, in their own systems. And when you come back and say, hey, I'm a global, company, I'm sort of looking at this stuff globally, how do I get a single pane of view to all of this stuff? It was impossible. And it was also, I think, unfathomable for these companies to say that is the expectation of how we run our business. We look at a lot of the stuff that Google has done with just text, and Google has taken textual search information across the globe and created products like AutoSuggest that we now take as just common sense. Like, yeah, of course, that's how AutoSuggest works. But rewind 10 years and there was no AutoSuggest. And the first time Google took this human sort of domain knowledge and constructed auto suggest out of it, everyone was blown. Like when I type, CRO and you type CRO, we get completely different results. And strangely, the first five results, contain some of the information that we are looking for. So the logistics industry is sort of going through a little bit of that same transformation where it is going from, we don't have data at all and we don't expect the data to drive our decisions to circa, 2020, where people are like, I think we do need data to make our decisions. And when they see the implication of all of this information available to them at their fingertips, people just assume that, wow, how did we run our business without that type of model? Looking back, we sort of, don't really understand the domain that these companies sort of work in. And so for me, it has been an incredible learning opportunity to just really understand the complexity of supply chains for, all of these Fortune 100 companies that are, supporting our Main Street economy. I mean, the technology companies are supporting the Main Street companies, but they are the companies that are supporting the real world economy. And so we are, very fortunate to be working with them. We have companies like, Smithfield that is the largest, I think, pork manufacturer in the U.S. and I think the exporter as well. It's quite incredible to see how complex their supply chains are and how sophisticated they can be without that. It reminds me of an anecdote a little bit about this Dabba system in India. So India has this Dabba means lunchbox essentially, and what this ecosystem provides is you can have someone come get you your lunch to work. And there is a logistic supply chain where there is all of this is word of mouth, where someone goes to your house, picks up your lunchbox, and then transports it to the station. Someone else will take it to another station, and then they it's basically a hub and spoke model and how they distribute this stuff, and it's all by word of mouth. And a lot of the industry sort of operates in that way anecdotally, and it's amazing that all of this stuff comes together. So coming back a little bit to FourKites, what we do with that context is get information from all kinds of moving assets. That asset can be a truck, that asset can be a train, it can be an airplane, it can be a truck or a full truckload, less than truckload, so on and so forth. So we get this telematic data from thousands and thousands of organizations. We manage. I think we have connected to over 3 million assets today, and we take that information and stitch it with the company's logistics management system. So things like purchase orders, things like their origin and destination, and so on and so forth. And we bring all of this stuff information together in a semantically cohesive way to give them a view to their entire supply chain. And it's quite amazing what results companies accomplish based on the data they have.
Clearly, with Chicago being, you know, one of the biggest hubs, right? The center of transportation, logistics, supply chain. I looked on G2.com to kind of see where, your organization fell from the rankings and things like that. There's not a lot of competitors in this space, not serious competitors. So why do you think historically there haven't been too many competitors?
I think the problem that you get from a lot of different sort of spaces is that you have to think of it from the client's point of view versus the provider's point of view. So what's happening is providers are saying that, look, I provide best in class service, and a lot of them are just phenomenal providers of that service, and that can be a trucking service or a shipping service and so on and so forth. And those providers are just providing really fantastic service to their clients. Where the clients are struggling with is to stitch together this holistic view of all of their providers. And there is a natural problem in this industry where there is no provider that is going to give their data to someone else, right? I mean, that just will not happen. And so because of that, FourKites has been able to sort of create this space where we are a neutral provider of information and analytics based on all of these different parties to the ecosystem. Chicago is an interesting space because I think our customers relate a lot more to us because of that. I mean, it's a nuanced thing to some extent, but when you are working with these manufacturing companies and these supply chains, and the user base and that company is much more comfortable with a company style that is grounded in Chicago values versus the Silicon Valley values. There's nothing wrong with that, but there is just this natural bias, maybe you call it tribalism to some extent, that we want to work with people like us. And so that allows sort of a greater affinity to a company like FourKites that has a value system of the types of companies that we serve. And so there isn't a lot of friction in that. We understand sort of their world, and we sort of have agreed to sort of work in synchronicity of how our customers' value systems work as well.
Yeah, it is interesting though when you think about like the amount of investment that's going on in that space, right? The digitization, that type of transformations that are going on. And I think that leads into a good question about ROI and creating value, creating opportunities, right? And so I guess, you recently wrote an article where you touched on that idea of like, technical versus product investment. I thought maybe if you could share some of your ideas around what does that mean to you, right? What's the difference between technical and product investment?
Absolutely. So, I think the FourKites philosophy has been, and my philosophy as well, is let's do work in service of customers. Now, depending on who you are functionally within an organization, you're going to have a different perspective on what will make the customer successful, right? So if you're on the product support side, you're hypersensitive to making sure the customer operations are running smoothly. If you're sort of on the product side, you're really making sure that you're creating product that meets the customers sort of business needs, and there is a real sort of synchronization to that. If you're on the engineering side, you're trying to really provide a substrate from an engineering platform perspective that meets all of these different demands. If you're from the sales side, you want to be able to showcase these things in a very effective manner to customers, and also make sure that we have our ear to the ground on that. So you've got a lot of these constituents that in an organization make it effective in order to serve the customer request. So the stance that we have sort of tried, I shouldn't say stance, but the culture we've tried to create is to have every function not start the discussion with here is what I want to do, but here is why I want to do it. I think starting discussions with here is why versus here is what enables you to sort of bring this cross-functional group together in supporting that decision. So we undertook we've undertaken some significant technical investments in the last year to improve the quality of data, to improve the integration processes, to improve the quality of experience that our customers get. We have invested in performance of the application, in some cases reducing or improving the performance by 4x in some of these cases, perhaps reducing the time to produce a certain result that may be offline, so on and so forth. So when we go about sort of making the decisions on this side, we're really thinking about how we make those decisions to be business centric versus resume centric to some extent. There was a phase, I think, in engineering where a lot of development was resume driven versus business driven. I think we are past that. I think we're past that phase to some extent. I feel like maybe the service orientation phase was maybe around 10 years back, where everything seemed to be resume driven. I think we're past that phase now. But so what is the balance between product centric versus engineering centric then become? It's really about thinking from these different perspectives and making allocations to support these different perspectives and not over indexing on one or the other. So, over indexing would mean that I am going to abandon all my governance and I'm going to only invest in one point of view. And that point of view may be I need to build a new feature that comes from customer demand. Another point of view maybe we need to improve performance, availability, reliability, business continuity, disaster recovery, and all of those things. And we say we will not do any of those. That is when the company starts sort of making poor decisions because they are not thinking about all of the points of view that the organization brings to the table, because all of these points of view need to have a singular business or mission of essentially delighting customers.
It's a really interesting perspective. So that balancing act of, because when you're starting out, it's very just feature, right? It's what does the customer need? How are we going to get that next big customer, right? How do we close that next big deal? And I love the resume driven architecture model. I've witnessed it firsthand. I was a little very confused by it. Like, why would you decide this? It seems incongruent. And then, you realize it's not actually for the benefit of the company. But I think, you touch on that balancing act of like going from full throttle features to almost innovation crippling code. You're looking at either, risk removal, right? Or, refactoring, right? Where you're going back and paying back technical debt, right? So how do you take that throttle from like the featured, defect things people see, right, from a product standpoint, to the things that you're going to need, not today, but hopefully very soon as things start to throttle up, right? And so, and I think part of like a successful technologist, how do you, manage the product in a way that you're communicating to people, look, we have to turn the dial a little bit. We're not going to yank on these levers like it's all stop on features. We've got to go back and re-architect everything. But, there's parts of our house that needs a little love.
I think it's a combination of two things. I think it's a combination. It's an art for sure. And then I think a big part of it is emotional intelligence and leadership. It's the same way like when you're growing, when you're raising a child, you decide when they need to be disciplined and when it is okay for you to give in. It's that parental instinct that drives you to decide where on that spectrum you need to be on any given day. Because if you're like, total lockdown on everything, you're going to have a different outcome, right? And if you're like, yeah, you should go have a rave party every weekend, that's going to have a different outcome. So if people think of that instinct within themselves, saying, where do I center when I'm raising my child? Where do I lean when I'm raising my child? And how do I make that decision? To me, it's the same thing, same type of gut instinct that you apply on the business side, which is, I need to make sure that I have the right balance of, this, building new product versus making sure that the product that we have built is being used and is usable by our customers. And usability is where all of the, technical illities sort of come into play. So I think sort of it's hard to say that, use this metric or that metric to drive that. I think it's just your leadership capability and your leadership sense, and you're keeping your ear to the ground that, sort of allows you to index at the right place based on where you are at, where your customers are at. You also have to know when not to listen too much or read too much into things. Where you've given someone a megaphone and they're sort of making an undue use of that. So it's a cop out answer.
It is not at all. It is the exact answer. Yeah.
It's a 20-year experience set of all of and this is why some companies succeed and some companies fail. it isn't, when I did a startup a long time ago, and I was terrified of sharing my idea because I thought that my idea was an insanely good idea. It was around providing, sort of auction capabilities for automotive repair. It's like, if you are a user and you want to get some repair done, I'm going to, provide your request for that service to a whole bunch of service providers. They're going to provide a reverse auction to what they essentially want to, charge for it, and you would go to one of them. So I was in this zone right after school, well, I thought that's going to change the world. We spend $66 billion a year on automotive repair, and that's the thing to do. So I was terrified of sharing my idea, and I spent about a year and a half, 2 years on building this idea. And I came to the conclusion during that point in time that ideas are, worth pennies. The idea itself is not what makes the thing a business. What makes a thing a business is all about execution and all about sort of following through on the things that matter. So, when I go back to how do you make that decision between indexing one way or another, it is all of those things that allow a company to really grow and service their customers and create the right messaging and make them successful. If we make our customers successful, then I don't worry about FourKite success.
That's awesome. The analogy with the kids, I just want to make sure my wife hadn't called you and said, "Hey, tell Pat, time to lighten up a little bit." Because I've fallen to the lockdown side of the house of broken glass kind of philosophy of like we overreact. But it's a great analogy, and I think you touch on it. It's not a cop out answer. It is the answer. It is a balance, and it's hard. I mean, these are the challenges of leadership, of making decisions where X doesn't equal some number, right? And it's nuanced, and it takes some understanding. So when you share,
I actually want to add one more thing to it, and that is about building a great team. So I don't want to sort of lead us to the conclusion that a leader with the right nuance is the right solution for the company. A leader that has a great team that has the right nuance is the best solution for the company. It is not a singular person, it is a team. And so that team is what really, really matters. And so for me, I index more towards how do I get my team to a place where they are better than me in making that decision in order for us to go down the right path. And so I think, you know, to me, that part of it is probably 5x more important than you yourself having the right nuance. And I think a lot of people stumble on that in that they don't really elevate the team importance to as much as it needs to be. I think that is probably a big part of having the company at the right nuance level.
I'm glad you brought that up, Vivek. And, I'm a little biased. I've worked with you in the past. I know you're a great leader, but I'm just curious, when you came into FourKites, did you inherit your team? Did you hire them? Is it a mixture of both? And then just from a technology standpoint, obviously it's very hard for you to find talent. So how do you find those folks that really fit with FourKites culture, which seems to be around delighting customers?
So I think the answer is both. I think that the first 10 developers that joined FourKites, about 80% of them are still at FourKites, and they started when they were 10. That was it. There was no team. I mean, our funding was very anemic at that point in time, and so it is not the company that we are at today. We are at about 500 people now. So to me, there is a huge attribution to the two founders, Matt and Arun, that sort of created the right sensibility to begin with, because that sensibility has percolated in the organization through the years. We have brought in a lot more people that sort of to round out the team. So we do both, hiring new people as well as sort of boosting or amplifying the people that have been with us. We are adding more to our leadership team in Chicago. We're hiring a VP of security, a director of engineering. We're hiring engineers in Chicago to sort of, again, going back to that, indexing the right way to make sure that we have the right balance of our team in the right locations.
Great. Thank you.
I don't know if I answered your question though.
No, I think you did. I think the second piece of it is, again, because it's such a tight labor market, how do you find those people who really fit the dynamic of your team and the culture that you're trying to build?
Right. I joined ThoughtWorks when it was 300 people. ThoughtWorks is now, I think, over 5,000 people. It has probably the most luminaries that I am aware of in the tech industry, maybe outside of IBM. And
Well, and I can vouch for that because when I need to steal some content, I definitely go to ThoughtWorks.
so I was very fortunate to have worked there. The conversation we had then 15 years ago was the same conversation we have now. The industry is super tight. We possibly cannot find the best and brightest minds to work here, and we had the same conversation at when I was at Morningstar and Uptake as well. So I don't think that equation has changed. I mean, it has always been hard to find people. It has never, ever in my 20 years of working been easy to find people. But I think the question is, I think the question that you're sort of getting at is how do you attract the right people? How do you make this a location or a home for people to go to? I think the question for that is when you have people at that level of performance and level of sort of capability, they are not looking for a paycheck. They know they can get a paycheck. I mean, most people that I've had the chance to work with, they know they can make a call to me, and I would give them a job. And so they're not moving because they need a new paycheck. In fact, I'll give you a slight detour and go back to your question. There was a colleague of mine that had worked with me before, and he reached out to me for a referral, and I offered him a job instead. So
I love it.
that's the market. That's the market that exists in Chicago. So I think if people understand what your mission is, and people feel they're going to work in a plus team, I think you automatically become a place for them to go because A plus people want to work with other A plus people.
Yeah.
So how do you create that team of equals where they feel that they're not going to be sort of the only smart person in the room and everyone else is just looking to them for direction? So if you create that model, people don't want to leave that because they won't get that elsewhere. They will not get that in a consulting company with 500,000 people.
Yeah.
They just won't. And so they don't want to go to that because life is too short. Why would you do that?
Mhm.
Yes, they should definitely go to consulting firms that are under 50 people named Dragon Spears.
That's right. I have had good experience with small consulting companies, so I would actually echo that sentiment that if you are going to choose a consulting company to work with, pick the companies that really care about technology and aren't post technology.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I do think you touch on a great part about culture and some of the things that I think maybe the person wasn't really actually reaching out for a referral, more checking to see if they could come home and work with somebody that they trusted. And I think we're both at that point in our career where we've got people that do reach out. That hey, I saw you're at a new place. Is there an opportunity? Is that something fits my career path as well? I think building those relationships, not just with, and I know Shelli and I talk about this all the time about who are your mentors, and I think we're going to get to that. But also, who are you being a mentor to, right? Who are you, my guidance to a lot of younger people, less experienced people is, I know the money is seductive and I understand, there's a certain portion where it's like, hey, it matters and it doesn't matter. But in the vacuum of that, I do think, finding somebody who's going to have an impact on your career, not just at this job, right? But actually have an impact on your next job and maybe even the job after that and help you. So I wonder, and so this is kind of has a couple ways we could go is the how to be a mentor, but also I wondered, lessons learned on as you've gotten to the level of success that you've had being a CTO, right? And your path and the things that you did and having gone from great organizations, like ThoughtWorks is, I agree 100%. They're an awesome organization. I admire them greatly, to Morningstar and Uptake and some of these really very identifiable, visible organizations and having some really, amazing success at those organizations. Was that part of the plan? Was that like when you thought about your career, were you intentional about it? I know we talked about this briefly earlier, but I'd really like for you to share your experience and your how you went about doing that. Because I think a lot of people are aspirational into the CTO role. And I don't think there's a lot of clarity as to like how does somebody set themselves up for that kind of success.
Yeah, it's a hard one to answer. I think it's a combination of serendipity and what you choose to do with your time. And I say serendipity in the way that you honestly don't know who your network is and how that network is going to ultimately shape your life, because a lot of your life is shaped on how your network is and who you may or may not have interacted with. So that is sort of the serendipity aspect of it. The intentional part of it is really what you choose to do with your time. I think uh, there there is there are mentors, and then there are jobs that change the trajectory of where your life goes. So you don't so it's not necessarily, hey, I'm going to take the job to become the CTO, I'm going to take that job to become that. It is really what is the job, what is interesting enough about it that will change the trajectory of where you're going. And really understanding that is important. I think if you work for a consulting company when you're young, it gives you the ability to be productive at a speed that is almost unreal, right? I mean, we talked about boutique consulting companies. When a consultant comes from Dragon Spears or another consulting company at say FourKites, it's very interesting how quickly they have to get up to speed. We expect them to be productive in 3 or 4 days, right? And there is a lot of pressure on the consultant to say, how do I get my shit together? How do I understand enough about the technology, the stack, the business, the process, and all of that stuff, distill it, so that I can be productive as fast as possible? And they don't even realize that's a skill, right? They just think of that as, that's my job. I got to just do it, right? And then you do it over and over again. And over a period of time, you get to a point where you can be dropped into a completely new and random situation, and just know how to sort of deal with it, because you've trained that muscle where you are being dropped over and over again into a new random situation and you have to be productive. So I think sort of my consulting part of the career helped me with that. At some point in time, I moved into the product side of the house because I really wanted to own the outcomes. I didn't want to sort of recommend and move on. I wanted to actually own the outcomes and the budget of the decisions that I was making. So that sort of leap was a personal leap. It wasn't necessarily a career leap. It was just like that's what I wanted to do, and that may or may not be what someone else listening to this may want to do. And within that, I think the thing that has really helped me over the years is really keeping that focus on business outcome. I think having that laser sharp view and having clarity on the business outcome has really allowed me to do things at a scale perhaps that wasn't necessarily even thought was required, because you're approaching it from that perspective. So I think those two things probably have helped a lot. The third thing I would say, I think you mentioned that a little bit earlier in terms of mentors and managers. People learn from watching. People don't learn about leadership technology from a book. I mean, you read books to get vocational information, but you don't learn to become a leader because you've read a book about leadership. You learn about leadership by watching a good leader, by being with a good leader, by learning from their successes and their mistakes, right? I mean, you should learn from other people's mistakes, not just your own. So those three things I think are important ingredients for people to just succeed in their life and sort of be all they can be and all they want to be.
That's a great point, and I do think the learning from others, not doing the same. I having worked at a large but ultimately not successful, cell phone manufacturer here in the greater Chicagoland area that I won't name. I learned a lot of like what I wouldn't do as a leader watching some of the managers and some of the people I reported to of like, I'll never do that to other people, right? Those things get ingrained, right? And it's like you learn from other people's mistakes, I just do a large organization walking past, empty parking spots that were reserved for executives while I'm parked 3 miles out. Definitely did not incentivize me to be highly productive that day, right? And I know it seems goofy, but I think those are the things that do taint you, or they help create a different perspective and empathy for the people that you're going to lead later on in life.
Right. I think you used an interesting word, empathy. I think of the opposite word that destroys companies is apathy. Right. One of my previous managers, Greg Goff, just a super nice guy that I worked with, had this interesting phase that people sort of in their careers get to a point where they think of money as flowing. Right. They just think that money flows, and I don't have to do anything to make money as an employee of the company. The company will make money, but it's not my responsibility to sort of affect that. That just is going to happen. And then you sort of move from being an empowered individual that actually makes decisions to change outcomes to a watcher, and you're just watching things happen, and there is apathy that sets in. And once you have a growing percentage of your company that is apathetic, that is the type of stuff that then goes wrong. And we've seen things in the marketplace with safety concerns and things like that of organizations where there is sort of an eventual, you know, uh, culture in the company where there is apathy towards certain things, and that balance of things gets lost, and that's what sort of destroys even great companies.
So one last concept, right? What is the most important thing that you've learned in the last year? What's the thing that if you were going to teach an MBA class today, right? If you're in front of a class over at Kellogg or University of Chicago, and they said, okay, give us the one thing you've learned that really impacted the way you think
Right.
in the last year.
I think in the last year, I'd say I lost both my parents,
Oh, I'm so sorry, Vivek.
and you learn a lot of things when that happens, and so the thing that sort of I learned from that experience is we put a lot of stock in capital and not enough stock in people. Anyway, so I think I think that probably is a life lesson. Sort of, I've come to appreciate more over the last year. So I would probably say that would be a sort of important aspect of people to think through sort of where their priorities are, especially as we go through some of the impact of the coronavirus and things like that. I think it's important to sort of appreciate and embrace your family. And I think the other big thing is you have to engage life. Don't sort of take a job and just stick it out. You have to embrace life. You have to sort of do what you enjoy doing. You have to sort of be in it, and don't just watch it. I think if you embrace things that you are engaged with, it creates a very different outcome.
That's awesome.
Great advice.
That's awesome. I think about our grandparents. I think about our parents. I think about how does it all end, right? What do we have at the end? And I think about the relationships, the people, the stories, the experiences. That's the real value, right? We're not taking any of the money with us, last time I heard.
Yeah, when you think about all of the people that you worked with and the people that you would call, 20 years of your experience, you're going to call the people that you enjoyed working with. I mean, that's really what your network is. It doesn't matter how smart someone was. It matters, the relationship that you had with that person.
That's awesome.
Yeah. You're reminding me. So I do Peloton. So I love this one instructor because she's super sassy, and she basically says, "I know you're really killing yourself right now, but guess what? You got up today. It's a privilege."
Yeah, yeah.
That's
I
awesome.
gotta try Peloton out at some point.
I don't know if you've seen I know we'll edit this out, but there's that JP Sears guy. He does all those like videos where he makes fun of people. He's got one for Peloton. It's pretty funny.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I'll share it with you,
Yeah.
Shelly, and then you'll get mad at me. I sent it to a couple of folks that I know that do Peloton. They're like, Pat, you could use working out. And I'm like, yeah, I could. You're absolutely right. I'm built for comfort, not speed, though. So,
Yeah.
it's a life choice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate that last stuff. That's hard. I really think it's very brave of you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thanks.
for being vulnerable.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, you're a great leader. I think we can all tell that already. That's not easy stuff to talk about. So I think we're going to kind of wrap it up at this point. Amazing stuff. I really appreciate you sharing your experience.
Thank you for having
success. No, I mean, the impact that you've had with your career in Chicago, with the organization you've been at, and really excited about what you're going to do next. So thank you so much for sharing your experience and your time. And we also wanted to thank our listeners. We really appreciate all of you listening and taking time to join us.
And if you'd like to receive new episodes as they're published, you can subscribe by visiting our website at dragonspears.com/podcast, or find us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode was sponsored by Dragon Spears and produced by Dante32.